Tonight we're in Inverness, one of the fastest growing cities in the UK, but elsewhere in the Highlands it's a different story, with depopulation and housing shortages causing local MSP Kate Forbes to call the situation in this area a national emergency. So what are the big issues for people who live here? We've come to the Highlands to find out. Welcome to Debate Night. Which comes from, we had a lot of questions around this actually, from John Stewart. John, good evening.
Good evening. How would you help young people to remain in the Highlands to stop depopulation?
Right. John, what's been your family experience?
My daughter went away to uni a number of years ago. She then found work in Newcastle and stayed down there. But for family reasons, she had to move back to the Highlands. And coming back here has increased the expenditure twofold, which has made her life a bit more difficult being here.
Okay, there's a lot of strands to this around education, around housing as well, which we can unpick. Chris, you came back about a decade ago, brought the family back as well. Have they stayed?
Well, in fact, they've all left home and they're all away now. I feel very strongly about this, and I think I spent 10 years creating and producing a Gaelic language drama precisely to create jobs in Skye and to try to train local talent and young people to provide a reason. I think it's natural that, you know, kids will go away for university. I think it's healthy to go away, but the problem is coming back. Housing is a problem because the tourism means that the housing market here is kind of completely, well, certainly in Skye, is kind of distorted. But I think also jobs, and I think this thing of creating something long-term in terms of a sustainable future for sustainable industry. In my work, film and TV, what I wanted to create with that show was a way of sustainable work for people across the board. Great thing about film and TV is that you employ so many different strands, whether it's, you know, costume or makeup or directing or writing or producing.
Electricians.
You know, across the board, you're creating a huge range of jobs, and you can train those people, and those people then will stay if that is sustained. I mean, it's a real struggle to do anything outside of the central belt, frankly. And one of the things that I'm sort of permanently dealing with is trying to, stem the flow. I think your point is so valid. I hope very much 4 children, one of whom actually studying medicine in Aberdeen, just so living the experience of seeing people like the earlier lady and dealing with all these problems at very, very, you know, in very strapped circumstances. But anyway, he and his 3 sisters, very much, I would love them to come back, but you have to say, in terms of all those kids who leave, what are they coming back to? And if they can't afford, they can't compete with people who are retiring or who are having second homes or who are running Airbnbs or all of that stuff. That's not sustainable in terms of a community.
Yeah, the figures are really, really stark. So if you look at the 10 years from 2001 to 2021, the population aged up to 15 in the Highlands fell by 6.7%. Population 75 plus increased by 60%. I'm not saying which category you're in, Alison, but you, born in Dundee, moved to Essex, now back in the Highlands. What do we do about depopulation here?
Yeah, I've also lived in London as well, so I've run the gamut. Technically I've retired to the country, I suppose you'd have to say. I'm getting wrinkly. I know Ireland also has this problem and has thought about it a lot. And I mean, the big thing is, a big thing, and why I've managed to be here is reliable, high-speed broadband internet. Is huge, and weirdly there's more of that in the West than there is.
Well, not where I am.
In the East, yeah, it's very patchy, but I think it would be. I mean, the best thing would be to not start from where we are and not to have had the Highland clearances and a whole bunch of other stuff. But as we are where we are, it would be very good to really seriously look at going into individual communities and saying, what do you need? And saying, what would you like your use of houses to be, and at what limit would you like to set the Airbnbs? And, you know, would it be possible? I know Applecross cooperated on getting themselves an internet that would work for them. It's possible now for a relatively small community to be able to generate enough power to have community power that would be reliable. There are lots of things now that you could do, and then to encourage people who could, you know, people in the arts particularly, and anything online, could reasonably come, but you would have to have the GPs there, you'd have to have even silly, not silly things, but it costs so much to deliver things up here. It costs so much more. You have to level that playing field or everything costs more. But you could do a lot just working with communities, going in, helping them to find out what they need and helping them to get what they need and become a unit that can actually think about, if you're growing anything, how do you share growing? If you need a shop, how do we get a shop? If you need a library, how do we get a library? If you need to bring people in on touring circuits, which they used to do a lot more, how do you do that reasonably? But it's not being done at the moment. And you know, at least how do you get very young children looked after with proper oversight? And do we go back to cottage hospitals? Do we have smaller schools scattered about? Do we have online learning one day? You know, there's so much that you could do. It's not inconceivable.
Everybody in the room will have a view on this. Lady in the front first. Yeah.
Part of the experience I had in moving to the Highlands 3 years ago was a serious challenge in, I think, affordable housing. There are huge amounts of challenges there. You know, we looked at places like Inverness and Aviemore to live, but genuinely, they are where the jobs are, but we couldn't afford to live there. So I do feel strongly Inverness is the fastest growing city in the UK. There should be much more provision of affordable housing in this area.
Thank you, thank you. Lady over there.
This is a huge, huge issue. You know, I'm 35. I had a passion for being in the arts. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into a career in writing, acting, performing. That's what I wanted. I had to move away down to London to try and pursue that because there was nothing up here. And due to financial constraints, I had to move back up home. Living up here, you know, I'm now working a full-time job, 40 hours a week, for a decent-ish wage. And yet, I still can't afford to have my own house. I can't afford to rent. There's no housing up here that is actually affordable for me to do. It's an absolute disgrace that I should still be in that position, that I can't actually, you know, look for somewhere myself. That if I want to do that, I have to look at renting with someone else. And I shouldn't have to be able to do that because of the financial state that this country is in. It's absolutely disgusting.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Man at the back as well.
One of the few silver linings of COVID was that I could work from home. So I took the opportunity to move home. So we've now relocated to Inverness. But that meant moving in with my parents. It took us 27 months to find a house. We did eventually, but it was an absolute nightmare. People buying houses within a week of them being listed for more than 10% over asking. And if you're a young couple trying to buy a house, it's an absolute nightmare.
Thank you. If there are more of you with experience of that, I want to hear from you as well. But Emma Roddick, Kate Forbes says this is a national emergency, depopulation in Scotland. Is she right?
Yeah, depopulation as a whole in Scotland is very concerning. We know that we are starting to decline in population by 2033. That's incredibly scary if we want to keep public services going, and that's something that we need to tackle. The birth rate alone is not doing it, which is why we're looking at solutions for Scotland within migration, as well as rebalancing the population.
So where are they going to live?
East to
because
west.
These people say housing is the problem.
Housing is a big problem, and housing is why I'm in politics. So I completely relate to a lot of the stories here. I ended up homeless because I couldn't find a place that was affordable in Inverness when I was a teenager. And I'm very passionate about doing something about that. And I was glad to hear you say what we need to do is get into communities and ask them what they need, because that is what we're doing.
Well, you know what they need? They need more housing.
Well, it depends on the community, and the type of housing depends on the community and where it should be situated and how many bedrooms it is and is it accessible. And that is what we are doing with our Addressing Depopulation Action Plan, is actually going into communities and saying to them, what are the drivers that you see that are making people leave or causing young people not to be able to move back, and giving them a bit of money to go and tackle that particular driver so that we can take that learning and apply it to other places.
But you're way behind your targets on house building in Scotland, in the Highlands, certainly.
Yeah, and that's concerning, and we know that we've just had to reduce the money that we intended to spend on house building over the next year due to capital funding constraints. And that is very worrying. But the Deputy First Minister has made very clear that, if we end up getting any more money on top of the 10% cut that we've just faced from the UK government, then that money will be prioritised for housing.
OK, let me hear from more people. There's lots of hands up on this. Man on the end first, yes.
Yeah, thanks. Just to carry on from the affordable housing, we've heard quite a lot of people state there's a lack of affordable housing in the Highlands. The budget has just been cut by 196 million, which is the second year in a row that cuts have been made to affordable housing. How are we going to get affordable housing within the Highlands when the budget's been cut in such a big way?
Thank you. Lady back in the front here. Yeah.
No, it was just the experiences about housing as well. My husband and I stayed with both sets of parents. I come from Shetland, so we moved down here. We actually got a house on shared equity. I don't know what kind of schemes are on the go at the moment, but and now we're actually staying in like a 3-bedroom. Yeah, it's definitely a priority, and we chose to have children later on because we wanted to financially, well, we wanted to have a mortgage. And also I know a nurse who she was able to afford her private rent, but she couldn't get a mortgage, even though the mortgage was cheaper than our private rent as well. Okay. It didn't make sense.
OK,
yeah.
Thank you. And lady on the end at the back.
Yeah,
yes.
It's not just people looking to purchase housing, it's those that need to access housing through housing associations. The council are struggling to maintain the properties that they already have. They're down to just doing emergency repairs, let alone maintaining the properties. Some houses are, over 25 years old and the kitchens are falling apart, the drawers are coming away. Actually, they don't have drawers or shelves left in them, but the councils, they can't get in to repair them or upgrade them because there's no budget for that. So even people that have housing, it's not fit for use because there's no budget for that.
Thank you. And we can see there's a man with his hand up in your row as well. Thank you.
And the area of profiteering within the private rental sector, when is the Scottish Government going to do something consistent about that? If we're going to have radical politics, let's start to look at that, please.
OK, thank you. Rhoda Grant, you've got very strong views on this, and specifically what should happen around housing that has been in the public sector or paid for by public money.
So I believe that any housing that has had public money put into it should be reserved for the local population. There should be a burden on that property to make sure it can't be sold off to the highest bidder. It has to be sold, if it's being sold to somebody that lives and works locally. Because young people just aren't getting housing. We're driving our young people away from the Highlands and Islands because we could actually do so much. There is so much enthusiasm to build the economy, to create jobs, to do all those things. But if we can't keep our young people, if we can't attract people in, so we have issues with healthcare workers, for instance, on Skye, trying to find houses for people coming in. Yeah. The hospital was closed in Portree because they couldn't find workers, not because they couldn't find people willing to come to Skye. There was a load of people willing to come, but they couldn't find a home. So if we can't, reasonably well-paid people can't find a home to live in, to provide those services, the whole area is going to die because people are moving away because they can't access health services and the like within their community. So I think houses, socially built houses, but also croft houses, any house that has had public money put to the lift scheme as well, should remain within the local market. We need to also look at how we stop there are communities where 50–75% of the housing is second homes or holiday homes or holiday lets. No community can sustain that. So we need to put a limit. And I'm not saying all holiday homes are wrong, because obviously there's a lot of people in the Highlands and Islands that rent out property in the tourism market, and that's part of their income. but it has to be at a level that's sustainable within the local community and not inflating local house prices.